हे welcome back and अभी तो ना मेरा देर हो गया कल ना सोया देर से भाई कल सोने से हो गया मेरा 3 बजे। भाई बहन चोद ना मेरे को ना आ, नींद नहीं होता है। जब मेरा सोने का टाइम होता है 10 बजे से 11 बजे। तो यदि मैं उसमें से नहीं सोया ना भाई नींद ना 3 बजे या 4 बजे होने होगा। ओके भाई चलो डिस्कस हो करते हैं बाद में, लेकिन आज का स्टडी पढ़ते हैं। ओके मेरा क्लास है 11 बजे, लेकिन अभी 10 बजे चुके हैं ना, तो घंटे तो मेरे बुक पढ़ के ही अब बिताना पड़ेगा। ओके आज चैप्टर पढ़ेंगे, चैप्टर नंबर 3। ही हु कैन डू दिस हैज द होल वर्ल्ड विथ हिम, ही हु कैनॉट walk a lonely way. I often went fishing of a main during the summer. Personally, I am very fond of strawberries and cream, but I have found that for some strange reason, fish prepare worms. So when I went fishing, I did not think about what I wanted. Thought about okay, fish prepare worms. So when fishing, I don't think about what I wanted. I thought about what they wanted. I did not beat the hook with strawberries and cream. Rather, I dangled a worm or a grasshopper in front of the fish and said, "Would not you like to have it?" Why not use the same common sense when fishing for people? That is what Lloyd George, Great Britain Prime Minister during World War One, did when someone asked him how he managed to stay in power after other wartime leaders. Okay, Williamson, Orlando, and the Clemenceau had been forgotten. He replied that if his staying on top might be attributed to any one thing, it would be this having learned that it was necessary to bait the hook to the sweet the fish. Why talk about what we want? That is the childish, absurd. Of course, you are interested in what you want. You are eternally interested in it, but no one else is. The rest of us are just like you. We are interested in what we want. So, so the only way on earth to influence other people is to talk about what they want and show them how to get it. Okay, remember that tomorrow when you are trying to get somebody to to do something, if for example you do not want to children want your children to smoke, don't preach at them. Don't talk about what you want, but show them that cigarettes may keep them from making the basketball team and winning the 100-year dash. Okay, this is a good thing to remember regardless of whether you are dealing with children or calves of chimpanzees. For example, one day, Ralph Waldo Emerson and his son tried to get a calf into the barn, but they made the common mistake of thinking only of what they wanted. Emerson forced and his son pulled, but the calf was doing just what they were doing. He is thinking only of what he wanted. So he stiffened his legs and stubbornly refused to leave the posture. The Irish housemaid law, their predicament. She could not write essays and books, but on this occasion at least she had more horse sense or calf sense that than Emerson had. She thought of what the calf wanted, so he put her maternal finger in the calf's mouth and let the calf stroke her finger as she gently led him into the barn. Every act you have ever performed since the day you were born was performed because you wanted something. How about the time you gave a large contribution to the Red Cross? Yes, that is no exception to the rule. You gave the Red Cross the donation because you wanted to lend a helping hand. You wanted to do a beautiful, unselfish, divine act. In as much as ye have done in onto one of the list of these my breath rain you have done in onto one onto me. If you hadn't wanted that feeling more than you wanted your money, you would not have made the contribution. Of course, you might have made the contribution because you were ashamed to refuse or because a customer asked you to do it. But one thing certain, you made the contribution because you wanted something. Harry A. Overstreet, in his illuminating book Influencing Human Behavior, said, action springs out of what we fundamentally desire, and the best piece of advice which can be given in to would be pursuers, whether in business, in the home, in the school, or in politics, is first arouse the in the other person an eager want. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way. Andrew Carnegie, the poverty-stricken Scotch and lad who started to work at 2 cents at an hour and finally gave away $365 million, learned yearly in life that the only way to influence people is to talk in terms of what other person wants. He attended school only 4 years, yet he learned how to handle people. To illustrate, his sister-in-law was already sick over her two boys. They were at a yearly and they were so busy with their own affairs that they neglected to write home and paid no attention whatever to their mother's frantic letters. Then Carnegie offered to Wager $100 that he could get an answer by return mail without even asking for it. Someone called his bet. Some he wrote his nephews a chatty letter mentioning casually in a postscript that he was sending each one a $5 bill. He neglected, however, to enclose the money. Beckham replies by return mail thanking Dear Uncle Andrew for his kind note, and you can finish the sentence yourself. And another example of persuading comes from Stan Novak of Cleveland, Ohio, a participant in our course. Stan came home from work one evening to find his youngest son, Tim, kicking and screaming on the living room floor. He was to starting kindergarten the next day and was protesting that he would not go. Stan's normal reaction would have been to vanish the child to his room and tell him he had just better make up his mind to go. He had no choice but tonight, recognizing that this would not really help Tim start kindergarten in the best frame of mind. Stan sat down and thought, if I were Tim, why would I be excited about going to kindergarten? He and his wife made a list of all the fun things Tim would do, such as finger painting, singing, song, making new friends. Then they put them into action. We all started finger painting on the kitchen table. My wife Lil, my other son Bob, and myself, all having fun. Soon Tim was peeping around the corner. Next he was begging to participate. Oh no, you have to go kindergarten first to learn how to finger paint. With all enthusiasm I could muster, I want to throw the list talking in terms he would understand, telling him all the fun he would have in kindergarten. The next morning, I thought I was the fastest one off. I went downstairs and found Tim sitting sound asleep in the living room chair. What are you doing here? I asked. I am waiting to go to the kindergarten. I did not want to be late. The enthusiasm of our entire family had aroused in Tom, Tim, and Edgar want that no amount of discussion or threat could have possibly accomplished. Tomorrow, you may want to persuade somebody to do something. Before you speak, pause and ask yourself, how can I make this person want to do this? Do it. That question will stop us from the rushing into a situation heedlessly with futile chatter about our desires. At one time, I rented the grand ballroom of a certain New York hotel for 20 nights in each season in order to hold a series of lectures. At the beginning of one season, I was suddenly informed that I should have to pay almost three times as much rent as formerly. This news reached me after the tickets had been printed and distributed and all announcements had been made. Naturally, I did not want to pay the increase, but what was the use of talking to the hotel about what I wanted? They were interested only in what they wanted. So, a couple of days later, I went to see the manager. I was a bit shocked when I got your letter. I said, but I don't blame you at all. If I had been in your position, I should probably have written a similar letter myself. Your duty as a manager of hotel is to make all the profit possible. If you don't do that, you will be fired and you out to be fired. Now let's take a piece of paper and write down the advantages and disadvantages that will occur to you. If you insist on this increase in rent, then I took a letterhead and ran a line through the center and headed on one column advantages and other column disadvantages. I wrote down under the head advantages. These were ballroom free. Then I went on to say you will have the advantages of having the ballroom free to rent for dances and convention. That is a big advantage for the affairs like that will pay you much more than you can get for a series of lectures. If I tie your bedroom ballroom for 20 nights during the course of the season, it is sure to me a loss of some very profitable business to you. Now, let's consider the disadvantage. First, instead of increasing your income from me, you are going to decrease it. In fact, you are going to wipe it out because I cannot pay the rent you are asking, shall be forced to hold these lectures at some other place. There is another disadvantage to you also. These lectures attract crowds to educated and cultured people to your hotel. That is good advertising for you, isn't it? In fact, if you spent $5,000 advertising in the newspaper, you could you could not bring as many people look at your hotel as I can bring by these lectures. That is worth a lot of a hotel, isn't it? Okay, as I talked, I wrote these two disadvantages under the proper heading and handed the sheet of paper to the manager saying I wish you would carefully consider both the advantages and disadvantages that are going to occur occur to you and then give me your final decision. I received a letter that next day informing me that my rent would be increased by 50% instead of 300%. Mind you, I got this reduction without saying a word about what I wanted. I talked all the time about what the other person wanted and how he could get it. Suppose I had done the human, natural thing. Suppose I had stormed into his office and said, what do you mean by raising my rent 300%? What? When you know the tickets have been printed and announcements made, 300% ridiculous, absurd, I won't pay it. What would have happened then? An argument would have begun to steam and boil and sputter. And you know how arguments end. Even if I had convinced him that he was wrong, his pride would have made it difficult for him to back down and give in. Here is one of the best bits of the advice ever given about the fine art of human relationship. If there is any secret of success, said Henry Ford, there is any one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from that person's angle as well as from your own. That is so good. I want to repeat it. If there is any one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from that person's angle as well from your own. That is so simple, so obvious that anyone out to see the truth of it at a glance. Yet 90% of people on this earth ignore it 90% of the time. An example, look at the letters that will come across your desk tomorrow morning, and you will find that most of them violate this important canon of common sense. Take this one, a letter written by the head of the radio department of the advertising agency with offices scattered across the continent. This letter was sent to the managers of local radio stations throughout the country. I have set down in brackets my reactions to each paragraph. Okay, that letter are what are written in that letter we are now discussed. First is in top of the left top of the left, Mr. John Blank, Blankville, Indiana. Dear Mr. Blank, and the subject है, the company desires to retain its position in advertising agency leadership in the radio field. Okay, ये लिखा था. Who cares what your company desires? I am worried about my own problems. The bank is foreclosing the mortgage on my house. The bugs are destroying the hollyhocks. The stock market stumbled. Yesterday, I missed the 8:15 this morning. I wasn't invited to the John's dance last night. The doctor tell me I have high blood pressure and neuritis and dandruff. And then what happens? I come down to office this morning, read, open my mail, and here is some little whiffers snapper of in New York, weeping about what his company wants. Wow! If he only realized what sort of impression his letter makes, he would get out of the advertising business and start manufacturing cheap deep. This agency national advertising accounts were the bulwark of the network. Our subsequent clearance of stations time have kept us at the top of agencies year after year. You are big and rich, and right at the top you are. So what? Don't give two hoops in heads. If you are as big as General Motors and General Electric and General Staff of US Army, all combined, if you had as much sense as half-witted humming hummingbird, you would realize that I am interested in how big I am, not how big you are. All this talk about your enormous success makes me feel small and unimportant. We desire to service our accounts with the last word on the radio station information. Okay, you desire your desire. You unmitigated us. I am not interested in what you desire or what the President of the United States desire. Let me tell you once and for all that I am interested in what I desire. And you haven't said a word about that yet in this absurd letter of yours. Will you, therefore, put the company on your preferred list for weekly station information? Every single detail that will be useful to agency in intelligently booking time. Okay, prepare the list. You have your nerve. You make me feel insignificant by the your big talk about your company, and then you ask me to put you on a preferred list, and you don't even say please when you ask it. A prompt acknowledgement of this letter giving us your latest doing will be mutually helpful. You fool, you mail me a cheap form letter. A letter scattered for far and wide like an autumn leaves. You have the gall to ask me when I am worried about mortals and hollyhocks, and my blood pressure to sit down and dictate a personal note acknowledging your form letter, and you ask me to do it promptly. What do you mean promptly? Don't you know I am just as busy as you are? Or at least I like to think I am. And while we are on the subject, who gave you the lordly right to order me around? You say it will be mutually helpful. At least, at last, you have begun to see my viewpoint, but you are vague about how it will be to my advantage. Very truly yours, John Doe, Manager Radio Department. P.S. The enclosed reprint from the Blankville journal will be the interest to you, and you may want to broadcast it over your station. Finally, down here in the postscript, you mention something that may help me solve one of my problems. Why did not you begin your letter with, but what's the use? And any advertising man who is guilty of perpetrating perpetrating such drivel as you have sent me has something wrong with his medulla oblongata. You don't need a letter giving our latest doing. What you need is a quart of iodine in your thyroid gland. Okay, now if people who devote their lives to advertising and who pose as experts in the art of influencing people to buy, if write a letter like that, what can we expect from the butcher and the baker or the auto mechanic? Here is another letter written by the superintendent of a large freight terminal to a student of this course, Edward Vermeulen. What effect did this letter have on the man to whom it was addressed? Read it and then I will tell you. A Georgia Sun Inc. 28 Front Street, Brooklyn and Newark 11 to 11 to 1, 201. Attention, Mr. Edward Vermeil. Gentlemen, to operations at our outbound rail receiving station are handicapped because a material percentage of the total business is delivered to us in a late afternoon. This condition results in congestion, overtime on the part of our forces, delay to trucks, and in some cases, delay to freight. On November 10, we received from your company a lot of uh, 5051 pieces, which reached here uh, at 4:20 p.m. We solicit your cooperation toward overcoming the undesirable effect arising from the late receipt of freight. May we ask that one day on which you shift the volume which was received on the above date, effort be made either to get the truck here earlier or to deliver us what to freight during the morning. The advantage that would occur to you under such an arrangement would be that of the expedition, grandiose discharge of your truck, and assurance that your business would go forward on the death of its receipt. Very truly yours, J.B. Soft. After reading this letter, Mr. Berlim, sales manager for a Jerry Gas Son Inc., sent it to me with the following comment. This letter had the reverse effect from that which was intended. Okay, the letter begins the describing the terminal's difficulties in which we are not interested. Generally speaking, our cooperation is then requested without any thought as to whether it would inconvenience us, and then finally, in the last paragraph, the fact is mentioned that if we do cooperate, it will mean a more expeditious discharge from of our trucks, with the assurance that our freight will go forward on the date of its receipt. In other words, that in which we are most interested in mentioned last and whole effect in is one of rising a spirit of antagonism rather than of cooperation. Okay, let's see if we can't rewrite and improve this letter. Let's not waste any time talking about our problems. As Henry Ford admonishes, let's get the other person's point of view and see things from his and her angle as well as from our own. Here is one way of revising the letter. It may not be the best way, but isn't it an improvement? Okay, Mr. Edward Berlim, CEO a Jeriga Soning, 28 Front ST, Brooklyn, New York 11201. Dear Mr. Berlim, your company has been one of our good customer of 14 years. Naturally, we are very grateful of your patronage and are eager to give you a so speedy, efficient service you deserve. However, we regret to say that it isn't possible for us to do that when your trucks brings us a large shipment late in the afternoon as they did on November 10. Why? Because many other customers may late afternoon deliveries also. Naturally, that causes congestion. That means your stocks are held up unavoidably at the pier and sometimes even your freight is delayed. That's the bad, but it can be avoided if you make your deliveries at the pier in the morning when possible. Your trucks will be able to keep moving, your freight will be get immediate attention, and our workers will get home early and at night to enjoy a dinner of a delicious marconi and noodles that you manufactures. Regardless of when your shipments arrive, we shall always cheerfully do all in our power to serve you promptly. You are busy. Please don't trouble to answer this note. You are truly JB Sport. Okay, Barbara Anderson, who worked in a bank in Newark, desired to move to Phoenix, Arizona because of the health of her son. Using the principles she had learned in our course, she wrote the following letter to 12 banks in Phoenix. Dear sir, my 10 years of bank experience should be of interest to rapidly growing bank like yours in various capacities in bank operations with a banker's trust company in New York leading to my present assignment as a branch manager. I have acquired skills in all pages of banking including deposit relations, credit, loans and administration. I will be relocating out to Phoenix in May, and I am sure I can contribute to your growth and profit. I will be in Phoenix the week of April 3 and would appreciate the opportunity to show you how I can help your bank meets goals. Sincerely, Barbara L. Anderson. Do you think Mr. Anderson received any response from that letter? 11 of the 12 banks invited her to be interviewed, and she had a choice of which bank offer to accept. Why? Mr. Anderson did not state what she wanted, but wrote in letter how she could help them, focused on their wants, not her own. Thousands of salespeople are founding the movements today, tired, discouraged, and underpaid. Why? Because they are always thinking only of what they want. They don't realize that neither you nor I want to buy anything. If we did, we would go out and buy it. But both of us are eternally interested in solving our problems. And if salespeople can show us how their services and merchandise will help us solve our problems, they won't need to sell us. We will buy. Okay. and the customer like to feel that they are buying, not being sold. Yet many salespeople spend a lifetime in selling without seeing things from the customer's angle. For example, for many years I lived in Forest Hills, a little community of private homes in the center of Greater New York. One day, as I was rushing to the station, I chanced to meet a real estate operator who had bought and sold property in that area of many years. He knew Forest Hills well, so I hurriedly asked him whether or not my stucco house was built with metal lath or hollow tile. He said he did not know and told me what I already knew, that I could find out by calling the Forest Hills Garden Association. The following morning, I received a letter from him. Did he give me the information I wanted? He could have gotten it in 60 seconds by a telephone call, but he did not. He told me again that I could get it by telephoning and then asked me to let him handle my insurance. He was not interested in helping me, he was interested only in helping himself. J. Howard Lucas of Birmingham, Alabama, tells how two salespeople from the same company handled the same type of situation. He reported, several years ago, I was on the management team of a small company. Headquartered near us was the district office of a large insurance company. Okay, their agents were assigned territories, and our company was assigned to be two agents whom I shall refer to as Carl and John. One Carl dropped by our office and casually mentioned that his company had just introduced a new life insurance policy for executives and thought we might be interested later on. He would get back to us when he had more information on it. The same day, John saw us the sidewalk while returning from a coffee break, and he shouted, hey, look, hold up. I have some great news for you, fellows. He hurried over and very excitedly told us about an executive life insurance policy his company had introduced that very day. It was the same policy that Carl had casually mentioned. He wanted us to have one of the first issued. He gave us a few important facts about that coverage and ended saying the policy is so new. I am going to have someone from to home office come out tomorrow and explain it. Now in the meantime, let's get the applications signed and on the way to so he can have more information to work with. His enthusiasm aroused in us an eager want for this policy, even though we still did not have details when they were made available to us. They confirmed John's initial understanding of the policy, and he not only sold each of us a policy but later doubled our coverage. Carl could have had those sales, but he made no effort to arouse in us any desire for the policies. The world is full of people who are grabbing and self-seeking. So the rare is individual who unselfishly tries to serve others has an enormous advantage. He has little competition. Owen D. Young, a noted lawyer and one of America's great business leaders, once said, people who can put themselves in the place of other people, who can understand working of their minds, need never worry about what the future has in store for them. If out of the reading this book you get just one thing, an increased tendency to think always in terms of other people's point of view, and see these things from their angle. If you get that one thing out of this book, it may easily prove to be one of the building blocks of your career. Looking at the other person's point of view and arousing in him an eager want for something is not to be construed as manipulating that person so that he will do something that is only for your benefit and his detriment. Each party should gain from the negotiation. In the letters to Mr. Vermeulen, both the sender and the receiver of the correspondence gained by implementing what was suggested. Both the banks and Mr. Anderson owned by her letter in that the bank obtained a valuable employee and Mr. Anderson a suitable job. And in the example of John's sale of insurance to Mr. Lucas, both gained through this transaction. Another people, another example in which everybody gains through this principle of arousing and eager want comes from Michael T. Whedon of War, Warwick, Rhode Island, who is a territory salesman for the Sail Whale Company. Mike wanted to become the number one salesperson in his district, but one service station was holding him back. It was run by an older man who could not be motivated to clean up his station. It was in such poor shape that the sales were declining significantly. This manager would not listen to any of Mike's pleas to upgrade the situation. After many exhor- exhortations and heart-to-heart talks, all of which had no impact, Mike decided to invite the manager to visit the newest sales station uh, in his territory. The manager was so impressed by the faculty's facilities at the new station that when Mike visited him the next time, his station was cleaned off and had recorded a sales increase. This enabled Mike to reach the number one spot in his district. All his talking and decision had not helped, but by arousing an eager want in the manager by showing him the modern station, he had accomplished his goal, and both the manager and Mike benefited. Most people go through college and learn to read Virgil and master of the masteries of calculus without ever discovering how their own minds function. For instance, I once gave a course of effective speaking for young college graduates who were entering the employee of career cooperation. The large air conditioners manufacturer, one of the participants wanted to pursue that others to play basketball in their free time, and this is about what he said. I want to come out and play basketball. I like to play basketball, but the last few times I have been the gymnasium, there haven't been enough people to get off a game. Two or three of us get to throwing the ball around the other night, and I got a big black eye. I wish all of you would come down tomorrow night. I want to play basketball. Did he talk about anything you want? You don't want to go to gymnasium that no one else goes to, do you? You don't care about what he wants. He don't want to get a big black eye. Could he have shown you how to get the things you want by using the gymnasium? Surely more thinner edge to the appetite, clearer brain, phone games, basketball. To repeat Professor Overstreet's wise advice, first arouse in other person an eager one. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way. One of the students in the author's training course was worried about his little boy. The child was underweight and refused to eat properly. His parents used the usual method. They scolded and nagged. Mother wants you to eat this and that. Father wants you to grow up to be a big man. Did the boy pay any attention to this, please? Just about as much as you pay on one's plate on sun. and sandy beach. No one with trace of horse sense would expect a child 3 years old to react to viewpoint of father 30 years old. Yet that was precisely that father had expected. It was absurd. He finally saw that he so he said to himself, "What does the boy want? How can I tie up what I want to he wants?" It was easy for the father when he started thinking about it. His boy had a tricycle that he loved to ride up and down the sidewalk in front of the house in Brooklyn. A few doors down in street lived a bully, a bigger boy who would pull the little boy off his tricycle and ride it himself. Okay. Naturally, it the little boy would run, screaming to his mother, and she would have to come out and take the bully off his tricycle and put her little boy on again. This happened almost every day. What did the little boy want? E.T. did not take a Sherlock Holmes to answer that one. His pride, his anger, his desire for a feeling of importance, all the strongest emotions in his makeup, goaded him to get revenge, to smash the bully in the nose. And when his father explained that the boy would be able to all of the daylight out of the bigger kids someday if he would only eat the things his mother wanted to him to eat. And when his father promised him that there was no longer any problem, the dietetics, the boy would have eaten spinach, sauerkraut, salad, marker, anything in order to be big enough to wake the bully who had humiliated him so often. After solving that problem, the parents tackled another. The title boy had the unholy habit of wetting his bed. He slept his grandmother in morning. His grandmother would wake up and feel sick and say, "Look, Johnny, what you did again last night." He would say, "No, I did not do it. You do it." Scolding, sparkling, slamming him, reiterating that parents did not want him to do it. None of these things kept the bed airy. So parents asked, "How can we make this boy want to stop wetting in his bed?" What were his wants? First, he wanted to wear pajamas like daddy instead of wearing nightgown like grandmother. Grandmother was getting fed off with his nocturnal inequalities, acuities. So she gladly offered to buy him a pair of pajamas if he would reform. Second, he wanted a bed of his own. Grandma did not object. His mother took him a department store in Brooklyn, ringed at the sales girl and said, "Here is a little gentleman who would like to do some shopping." The sales girl made him feel important by saying, "Young man, what can I show you?" He stood a couple of inches and taller and said, "I want to buy a bed for myself." And when he was shown the one of his mother wanted to him by his winked and sales girls, and the boy was persuaded to buy it. The bed was delivered the next day. That night, when the father came home, the little boy ran to the door shouting, "Daddy, daddy, daddy, come upstairs and see my bed that I brought." The father, looking at the bed and bewared Charles Schwab's injunction, he was heartily hearty in his approbation and lavish in his praise. "You are not going to wet this bed, are you?" the father said. "Oh, no, no, I am not going to wet this bed." This boy kept his promise, for his pride was involved. That was his bed. He alone had bought it, and he was wearing pajamas now like a little man. He wanted to act like a man, and he did. Another father, Katie Dotsman, a telephone engineer, student of this course, would not get this 3-year-old daughter to eat breakfast food. The usual scolding, pleading, coaxing method had all ended to futility. So the parents asked themselves, how can we make her want to do it? The little girl loved to imitate her mother, to feel big and grown up. So one morning they put her on a chair and let her make the breakfast food. At just a psychological moment, father drifted into the kitchen while she was stirring a cereal and she said, "Oh, look, Daddy, I am making the cereal this morning." She'll add to helping out the ceremony without any coaxing because she was interested in it. She had achieved a feeling of importance she had found in making the cereal an avenue of self-expression. William Winter once remarked that self-expression is the dominant necessity of human nature. Why can't we adopt this same psychology to business dealing? When we have a brilliant idea, instead of making others think is ours, why not let them cook and steer the idea themselves? They will then regard it as their own. They will like it and maybe eat a couple of helping of it. Remember, first arouse in other person to an eager want, and he who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks the lonely way. Okay, this is the chapter number 3, all about we talk about now. Okay, this chapter talks about the don't say what you want. You say and what they want. Okay, जो वो चाहते हैं ना वो उससे उनको बताओ, जैसे कि उनके बारे में सोच माने बात करो, ना कि भाई आप जो चाहते हैं ना उसके बारे में। प्रिंसिपल 3 कहता है एराउज इन अदर पर्सन एंड नेगर वांट। जो बंदा चाहता है, जो भी किसी के काम आप निकलना चाहते हैं ना, उसके साथ उसको जो चाहते, जो वो चाहते हैं वो उसे प्रेजेंट करो। ओके, इन ए नॉस्ट सेल फंडामेंटल टेक्निक्स इन हैंडलिंग पीपल, डोंट क्रिटिसाइज कंडेम और कंप्लेन। सेकेंड है गिव honest and sincere appreciation and arouse the other person and eager one। ओके, ये था आज सब कुछ, एंड चैप्टर 4 में नेक्स्ट मिलेंगे। बाय।